Inside a warm diner, a single father and his daughter were celebrating her acceptance into a choir when they suddenly noticed an elderly woman sitting alone, looking sad, with only a few loose coins on the table in front of her. Realizing how truly lonely she was, the father and daughter immediately walked over, sat down and shared their dinner with her. What they didn't know was that the woman sitting there was not an ordinary elderly woman. She had once been a famous jazz singer, and she would change their lives in ways they never imagined. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. $7. That's all I have for something warm to eat. The elderly woman's voice barely rose above a whisper as she counted the crumpled bills again, hoping somehow the numbers would change. Outside Rosie's Diner on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, the California sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked sidewalk, but inside, Margaret Sullivan sat frozen at the counter, staring at the menu she couldn't afford. 74 years old, her disability check wouldn't arrive for 3 more days and she couldn't even buy herself a proper meal. Then the bell above the door chimed, bringing in the afternoon heat and the sound of a child's laughter. A man and his daughter entered, their voices warm and easy, changing everything in ways none of them could imagine. Margaret had once been a celebrated jazz singer in the smoky clubs of San Francisco. Her voice had been compared to Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Dinah Washington. Critics called it liquid gold, a sound that could make grown men weep and hardened women remember their first love. She had performed at the legendary Black Hawk, the Hungry Eye, the Jazz Workshop. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, her records had sold thousands of copies. She had been somebody. Then came the night that ended everything. 2001, a tour bus accident on Highway 1 near Big Sur. The vehicle had tumbled down the cliff face like a child's toy, metal screaming against rock. When she woke 4 weeks later in San Francisco General Hospital, the doctors delivered their verdict with clinical detachment. Severe damage to her vocal cords and larynx, extensive trauma to her respiratory system. She would never sing professionally again. Her voice, when it returned at all, came out as a hoarse shadow of what it had been. Her husband Marcus had died 3 years before the accident. Heart attack at 58, gone before the ambulance arrived. They had never had children. Margaret had poured everything into her career, believing there would always be time later for a family. Now she understood that time was a luxury, not a promise. Her sister Gloria had helped initially, flying down from Seattle with casseroles and concern. But Gloria had her own family, her own problems. Their parents had passed years before. Now Margaret existed rather than lived in a single-room occupancy hotel on 6th Street in Los Angeles, where the walls were thin and the neighbors were loud, and everyone was just trying to survive until tomorrow. The building housed the forgotten ones. Elderly people on fixed Social Security checks, disabled veterans with haunted eyes, recovering addicts fighting their demons day by day, single mothers working multiple jobs just to keep a roof overhead. Margaret fit right in with her disability payments of $900 monthly that barely covered her $700 rent, leaving almost nothing for food or medicine. Friends from the music world had vanished like smoke after her accident. Fellow musicians had tried at first, sending cards and flowers that wilted within days, but people in the entertainment industry didn't know how to handle tragedy that couldn't be fixed with connections or money. They wanted to discuss gigs and recording sessions, not medical bills and lost dreams. They drifted away to where the music still played, where voices still soared, where success still seemed possible. The loneliness had become her most constant companion, more reliable than any human had ever been. At 74, she understood that most people her age had families, grandchildren, someone who cared whether they lived or died. She had nothing but memories of a voice that once made people stop and listen. Today she had ventured out because the walls of her room had felt like they were closing in. She had found $7 in her coat pocket, forgotten money from who knows when. Enough for coffee and maybe toast, not enough for the meatloaf special that smelled so good she could almost taste it. Not enough for dignity. The waitress, a young woman named Carmen with kind eyes and tired feet, had been patient as Margaret studied the menu like it was written in a foreign language. Carmen understood. She had seen enough people counting change to know the difference between careful budgeting and true poverty. "Take your time, honey," Carmen had said, refilling Margaret's water glass without being asked. "No rush." But there was always a rush when you were poor. Always the pressure of knowing you were taking up space that could be filled by a paying customer. Always the shame of not being able to afford what everyone else took for granted. James Carter stood just over 6 feet tall, his dark hands marked with the honest scars of 20 years working as a mechanic. Oil stains decorated his work shirt, despite his best efforts to clean up before taking his daughter out. At 43 years old, he owned Carter's Auto Repair on Figueroa Street, a small shop that kept food on the table and dreams alive. His daughter Destiny was 11 years old, all long limbs and bright energy. She had inherited her mother's beautiful voice and James's determination. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity about everything, and she had a habit of humming constantly, little melodies that seemed to spring from nowhere. James's wife, Angela, had died 3 years ago when Destiny was only 8, breast cancer. She had fought for 2 years through chemotherapy and radiation, through hope and despair. In the end she had made James promise 2 things. Take care of their baby girl, and never let Destiny stop singing. That child has a gift, Angela had whispered in those final days at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Don't let her waste it like I did. I could have been something, James, but I was too scared. Don't let Destiny be scared. So James had kept his promise, voice lessons when he could afford them. A keyboard bought second-hand but loved completely. Talent shows at school, church choir every Sunday. He worked extra hours, took on weekend jobs, did whatever it took to give Destiny the chances her mother never had. Today they were celebrating. Destiny had been accepted into the prestigious Los Angeles Youth Chorus, beating out 200 other kids for one of only 30 spots. The audition had been fierce, but when Destiny sang His Eye is on the Sparrow, the judges had actually stopped writing notes and just listened. Daddy, can we really eat anywhere I want? Destiny had asked earlier as they drove down Sunset Boulevard in James's well-maintained but aging Ford pickup. Anywhere, James confirmed, though his wallet held only $40 and he still had to make rent in 2 days. But some moments mattered more than money. Some promises to dead wives mattered more than practical concerns. Destiny chose Rosie's Diner because she loved their chocolate milkshakes and because the waitresses always smiled at her. It was the kind of place where working people could afford to treat themselves occasionally, where the food was simple but made with care. As they entered, Destiny was already chattering about the youth chorus. Mr. Henderson said I have perfect pitch, Daddy. That means I can hear a note and sing it exactly right without any help. He said that's really rare, and Mrs. Johnson wants me to try out for the solo in the Christmas concert. James listened with the attention he gave to every word his daughter spoke, knowing these moments of pure joy were what he lived for. But his eyes had already found the elderly woman at the counter, and something in her posture made him pause. James had grown up poor in Compton. He knew what defeat looked like in a person's shoulders, knew the particular way someone held themselves when they were counting every dollar and coming up short. His own grandmother had looked like that in her final years before his mother moved her in with them. His mother, Ruth Carter, had raised him on 2 principles: work hard and help others. She had cleaned houses for 30 years, but every Sunday she cooked extra food to take to the homeless shelter. Every Christmas she bought toys for kids whose parents couldn't afford presents. We don't have much, she would say, but we always have enough to share. James had inherited that philosophy. His shop was known in the neighborhood for fair prices and honest work. He had a reputation for fixing cars for single mothers at cost, for helping out elderly customers who lived on fixed incomes. He couldn't save the world, but he could make his corner of it a little better. Destiny had noticed the woman too. She had her mother's radar for people in pain. Daddy, that lady looks sad. Why does she look so sad? I don't know, baby girl. But maybe we should find out. As they approached the counter, James caught Carmen's eye. She tilted her head toward Margaret in a gesture that confirmed his suspicion. The woman was struggling. Excuse me, ma'am, James said gently, his voice carrying the warm authority of someone used to putting people at ease. My daughter and I couldn't help but notice you seem like you might need some company. Mind if we join you? Margaret looked up, startled. Her first instinct was to refuse, to protect what little dignity she had left, but something in the man's eyes stopped her. There was no pity there, just genuine kindness. And the little girl was smiling at her like Margaret was someone worth smiling at. I'm James Carter, he continued, sitting down beside her before she could protest. This is my daughter Destiny. We're celebrating today, and my mama always said celebrations are better when you share them. Destiny slid onto the stool on Margaret's other side. I got into the Los Angeles Youth Chorus. That's a really big deal. Daddy says we can order whatever we want. What are you gonna have? The child's direct enthusiasm was disarming. Margaret found herself almost smiling. Well, congratulations to you. That is a big deal. I was thinking maybe just some toast and coffee. Toast? Destiny wrinkled her nose. But they have chocolate chip pancakes, and the meatloaf special looks amazing. Daddy, she should get the meatloaf, right? Nobody should just have toast on a celebration day. James caught the look in Margaret's eyes before she could hide it. The want mixed with resignation. He had seen that look in the mirror often enough when Angela was sick and the medical bills kept coming. Carmen, he called to the waitress. We're having a big celebration lunch here. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. Margaret, she said quietly. Margaret Sullivan. This is Miss Margaret, James continued, and she's joining our celebration. We'll have the meatloaf special for her, pancakes for Destiny, and I'll take the turkey club. And 3 chocolate milkshakes because, as my daughter will tell you, every celebration requires chocolate milkshakes. I can't let you, Margaret protested, but her voice lacked conviction. You don't even know me. Well, that's easy to fix, James said. We're getting to know you right now. Destiny, tell Miss Margaret about your audition. And just like that, Destiny launched into the story, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement. Margaret found herself drawn in despite her instinct to withdraw. The child's joy was infectious, and James's quiet pride in his daughter was touching. I was so nervous, Miss Margaret. My hands were shaking and everything. But then I remembered what my mama told me before she died. She said when you sing, you gotta sing from your heart, not your head. And that's what I did. The casual mention of death shifted something in Margaret. She looked at James with new understanding. I'm sorry, that must be very hard. 3 years now, James said simply. Cancer, she fought hard, but sometimes fighting isn't enough. But before she passed, she made me promise to make sure Destiny kept singing. My wife had a beautiful voice herself, never pursued it professionally. She didn't want Destiny to have the same regrets. Something cracked open in Margaret's chest, a recognition of shared loss, of dreams deferred and redirected. Your mother was smart, she said to Destiny. Singing from the heart is the only way that matters. Do you sing? Destiny asked with the innocent directness of childhood. Margaret's hand went unconsciously to her throat. I used to, a long time ago. I was a jazz singer in San Francisco. Really? James leaned forward with genuine interest. My parents loved jazz. My father had a huge record collection. Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Miles Davis. What was your name? Maybe I've heard of you. Margaret Sullivan. Sometimes they called me Lady Maggie, but that was a lifetime ago. I had an accident. Can't sing anymore. Not really. My voice is gone. Destiny's eyes went wide. That's so sad. I can't imagine not being able to sing. But you could still teach, right? You could teach people like my mama wanted someone to teach her. The words hung in the air like notes waiting to resolve into a chord. Margaret stared at this child, who had just articulated something Margaret had never allowed herself to consider. If she couldn't perform, maybe she could still pass on what she knew. Maybe there was still purpose in the wreckage of her dreams. Carmen arrived with their food, the plates generous and steaming. The meatloaf smelled like comfort itself. Margaret's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Thank you, she whispered to James. You didn't have to do this. My mama taught me we're all in this life together, James said. Sometimes we need help. Sometimes we give it. It all balances out in the end. They ate together, the conversation flowing more easily than Margaret would have thought possible. Destiny talked about school and friends and the songs she wanted to learn. James told funny stories about cars he had fixed and customers who thought they knew more about engines than they did. And Margaret found herself talking about San Francisco in the 1970s and 80s, about the clubs and the music scene, about a world that seemed impossibly far away now. As they finished eating, James watched Margaret carefully. He was a man who believed in following his instincts, and his instincts told him this meeting was meant to be something more than just a shared meal. Miss Margaret, he said slowly, forming the words as the idea took shape. I know we just met, and this might sound crazy, but I think you were put in our path today for a reason. Margaret looked at him warily, uncertain where this was going. Destiny's voice teacher moved to New York last month. We've been looking for someone new, but nobody feels right. The fancy teachers charge too much, and they're all about technique, not soul. But you know jazz. You know what it means to sing from the heart. And Destiny needs that. Daddy, yes, Destiny bounced in her seat. Miss Margaret should teach me. She knows all about real singing. I don't know, Margaret said, fear and hope warring in her chest. I haven't taught anyone. I don't have a studio or proper equipment. I live in one room. We've got space, James said. Above my shop, there's a room I was going to rent out but never got around to it. It's empty right now. You could use it for teaching. We could set up a keyboard, get whatever else you need. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Margaret's practical side screamed that this was too good to be true, that she shouldn't trust this sudden kindness. But another part of her, the part that had been dormant since the accident, stirred with possibility. Then doubt crashed in like a wave. This man was offering her everything she needed, and what could she possibly offer in return? What if she failed Destiny? What if 24 years away from music had left her with nothing worth teaching? What if she took his money and his trust and couldn't deliver? I appreciate this more than you know, Margaret said carefully, her voice trembling. But I need to be honest with you. I haven't been around music in over 2 decades. I don't know if I even remember how to teach someone. What if I'm not good enough for your daughter? James was quiet for a moment, and Margaret braced herself for him to withdraw the offer. Instead he smiled. Miss Margaret, you spent 20 years performing at the highest level. That knowledge doesn't just disappear. And honestly, I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for someone who understands what music means. Someone who can teach Destiny that singing is about more than hitting the right notes. He paused. But I understand if you need time to think about it. How much time? Margaret asked, surprising herself. As long as you need. The room's not going anywhere. And neither are we. Margaret looked at Destiny's hopeful face, then back at James. She thought about her empty room, her empty days, her empty life. She thought about the years stretching ahead with nothing but survival to fill them. And she thought about the possibility, however terrifying, that maybe she still had something to give. I need to be clear about something, she said. I can't afford to pay much. $30 a lesson, twice a week, and if you want, the room above the shop could be yours to live in. No rent, just utilities. I know it's not much money for teaching, but with free housing, you'd be better off than you are now. Margaret's mind raced with calculations. $240 a month from teaching wasn't much, but saving the $700 on rent meant she would have over $900 extra each month. She could actually eat properly, buy medicine, maybe even save a little, and more than that she would have purpose. She would be doing what she loved, even if she couldn't perform anymore. But the practical considerations warred with deeper fears. What if she moved in and discovered she couldn't teach? What if she failed and had to face James's disappointment? What if accepting this kindness only led to more pain when it inevitably fell apart? Why would you do this? She asked, needing to understand. You don't know me. I could be a terrible teacher. I could take advantage of you. James smiled. I'm a pretty good judge of character. Comes with running a business in this neighborhood, and I see someone who's been knocked down by life but hasn't given up. Someone who still has something valuable to offer. My daughter needs what you have to teach, and maybe you need what we can offer, which is a chance to start again. Please say yes, Miss Margaret, Destiny pleaded. I'll work really hard. I'll practice every single day. I promise. Margaret looked at this child's hopeful face, at this man's steady confidence. She thought about the alternative, going back to her room alone with $7 and 3 days until her next check. She thought about waking up tomorrow with nothing to look forward to but the same emptiness that had filled her days for 24 years. And she thought about the tiny flame of hope that Destiny's words had sparked. Maybe she could still teach, maybe she still mattered. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in years but still uncertain. Yes, I'll try. But if it doesn't work out, if I'm not good enough, you have to promise you'll tell me. Don't let me waste Destiny's time out of kindness. Deal, James said, extending his hand. Margaret shook it, feeling the calluses from years of honest work. Come by the shop tomorrow, we'll show you the space, get you moved in if you want. Fresh start. When James paid the check, he left a generous tip for Carmen, who gave him a knowing smile. As they prepared to leave, Carmen caught Margaret's arm. That's a good man, she said quietly. And that little girl has something special. You take care of them, and they'll take care of you. That night in her cramped room, Margaret couldn't sleep. Tomorrow felt like both a promise and a threat. What if she failed? What if she couldn't teach? What if Destiny didn't actually have the talent Margaret thought she heard in her speaking voice? What if James changed his mind when he saw her belongings, saw how little she had, saw how far she had fallen? But underneath the fear was something she hadn't felt in 24 years. Hope, fragile and frightening, but real. Carter's Auto Repair sat on a busy corner of Figueroa Street, the kind of neighborhood shop that had been there long enough to become part of the community fabric. The building was old brick, 2 stories, with James's business on the ground floor and the empty apartment above. When Margaret arrived the next morning, her few possessions packed in 2 worn suitcases, James was already working on a Honda Civic, his hands dark with grease but his smile bright. You came, he said, and she heard relief in his voice. He had wondered if she would show up or if morning light would dissolve yesterday's connection like a dream. I said I would, Margaret replied simply. James wiped his hands on a rag and led her upstairs. The apartment was larger than her room had been, with a main space that could serve as both living area and teaching studio, a small kitchen and a bathroom that, while dated, was clean. The windows faced east, letting in morning light that made everything seem possible. It's not fancy, James said apologetically, but it's solid. New locks, windows that actually close, heat that works. And you're safe here. I live 3 blocks away with Destiny, so we're close by if you need anything. Margaret walked slowly through the space, touching the walls as if to confirm they were real. This was more than she had dared hope for. A place that didn't smell of mold and despair. A place where she could start over. Thank you, she whispered, overwhelmed by the kindness of this relative stranger. You're saving my life, you know. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. James shook his head. You're teaching my daughter. That's payment enough. Besides, my mama always said what goes around comes around. Maybe someone helped me once and I'm just passing it forward. Or maybe someone will help Destiny someday because I helped you. That's how it works. Over the next few days, James brought up a keyboard he found at a pawn shop, a small desk, a comfortable chair, and even a twin bed with clean sheets. His customers from the shop below contributed what they could. Mrs. Henderson from down the street donated a lamp and a coffee maker. Mr. Washington brought dishes. The community James was part of understood helping one of their own. The first lesson was scheduled for Saturday morning. Margaret woke early, nervous in a way she hadn't been since her first professional gig decades ago. She arranged the studio space carefully, positioning the keyboard and chairs to create the right atmosphere. She had spent the week thinking about curriculum, remembering her own training, considering what a young voice needed. When Destiny arrived, she was practically vibrating with excitement. James dropped her off with a smile and a wave, giving them space. Okay, Miss Margaret, I'm ready, teach me everything. Margaret smiled despite her nerves. First I need to hear you sing. Not performing, just singing. Something you know by heart. Destiny thought for a moment, then began singing Amazing Grace, and Margaret understood immediately why the youth chorus had accepted her. The child had more than talent. She had that indefinable quality that separated good singers from great ones. Her voice had depth and emotion beyond her years. She understood instinctively how to phrase, how to breathe, how to make each word matter. But there were technical issues. Her breathing needed work. She was pushing from her throat instead of her diaphragm. She had habits that, if not corrected now, would limit her range and power. When Destiny finished, she looked at Margaret expectantly. Was that okay? It was beautiful, Margaret said honestly. You have a gift, Destiny. A real gift, but gifts need to be trained and developed. We're going to work on technique, breathing and control. I'm going to be strict with you because you have the potential to be truly exceptional, but only if you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked before. Destiny's eyes got serious. I'll work hard. I promise. I want to be great, Miss Margaret. I want to make my daddy proud, and my mama. Even though she can't hear me anymore. Margaret's throat tightened. Your mama can hear you, baby. I believe that. And we're going to make sure when she listens, she hears something extraordinary. They worked for 2 hours. Margaret taught breathing exercises, proper posture and vocal warm-ups. She demonstrated despite her damaged voice, and was surprised to find that teaching didn't require the full power she once had. She could show technique, explain theory, guide development. Her knowledge was still valuable even if her performance days were over. Destiny absorbed everything like a sponge. She asked smart questions and didn't complain when Margaret made her repeat exercises over and over. By the end of the lesson, both of them were tired but exhilarated. When James came to pick up his daughter, Destiny ran to him. Daddy, it was amazing. Miss Margaret knows everything. She showed me how to breathe properly and my voice got stronger just in 2 hours. James looked at Margaret. She did well. She did wonderfully. Margaret said. Your daughter has something special, James. With proper training she could go very far. I mean that. As they left, Margaret sat at the keyboard and for the first time in years, felt something like contentment. She had a purpose again. A reason to wake up in the morning. A student who made her want to be better. 7 months passed in a rhythm of lessons and progress. Margaret threw herself into teaching with an intensity that surprised her. She researched techniques online at the public library, remembered lessons from her own teachers decades ago, watched videos of great performers. Destiny bloomed under the attention, her voice growing stronger and more controlled with each session. But Margaret was demanding. She pushed Destiny hard, sometimes to tears. She wouldn't accept less than perfect pitch, less than proper breath control, less than emotional authenticity. Some days Destiny left frustrated, feeling like she would never be good enough. I don't understand, Destiny complained one afternoon in early December, her voice thick with unshed tears. Mr. Henderson at the youth chorus says I'm doing great, but you always find something wrong. Am I really that bad? Margaret softened, recognizing the frustration she had felt herself as a young singer. She sat beside Destiny on the piano bench. You're not bad, you're exceptional. But exceptional isn't enough if you want to be great. Mr. Henderson works with a chorus. His job is to make everyone sound good together. My job is to make you sound spectacular on your own. There's a difference. But what if I can't be spectacular? What if I'm just okay? Margaret took Destiny's hand. Baby girl, when I hear you sing I hear my younger self. I hear potential that makes my heart ache because I know what you could become. But it won't happen by accident, it takes work and sacrifice and pushing through the moments when you want to quit. I'm hard on you because I care about you, because I see what you don't see yet in yourself. Destiny wiped her eyes. Did your teacher push you this hard? Harder, Margaret admitted. Professor Washington at the San Francisco Conservatory, where I studied in my 20s before going professional. She was fierce, made me cry at least once a week, but she made me great. And when I finally performed at the Black Hawk and got a standing ovation, she was in the audience crying, because she knew she had helped create something special. Will you cry when I'm great? Destiny asked with a small smile. Absolutely. Now let's work on that bridge section again. You're still not quite hitting the emotional tone I know you're capable of. The youth chorus's Christmas concert was approaching. Mr. Henderson had given Destiny a solo, a challenging arrangement of O Holy Night that would showcase her range and control. It was a big opportunity. The concert would be held at the Disney Concert Hall, and scouts from prestigious performing arts schools would be in attendance. Margaret worked with Destiny on the piece relentlessly. Every phrase, every breath, every emotional shift had to be perfect, but something was missing. Destiny was singing the notes correctly, but the soul wasn't there. It sounded technical rather than transcendent. 2 weeks before the concert, Margaret kept Destiny after their regular lesson. We need to talk about what this song means. Margaret said, O Holy Night isn't just notes on a page. It's about wonder and hope and the belief that something miraculous is happening. When have you felt that way? When has something happened that made you believe in miracles? Destiny thought for a long moment. When Daddy brought you into my life, she said quietly. I was so sad about losing my old teacher, and I was scared nobody would understand what I needed. Then Daddy saw you in that diner, and everything changed. That felt like a miracle." Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. "For me too, baby. That day changed my life. I had given up. I thought I had nothing left to offer the world. Then your father saw me, really saw me, and gave me a reason to keep going. So when you sing this song," Margaret continued, "think about that feeling. Think about the moment when you realize you're not alone. That help has come. That there's still hope. That's what this song is about. Not just a baby being born 2,000 years ago, but the continuous miracle of human connection and love." Destiny nodded slowly. "Can we try it again?" This time when Destiny sang, something shifted. The technical perfection was still there, but now it was infused with genuine emotion. Her voice soared on "Fall on Your Knees" with a power that made Margaret's breath catch. The room seemed to vibrate with the force of it. When Destiny finished, there was silence. Then Margaret began to cry, unable to stop the tears that had been building for months. These were tears of joy, and pride and recognition. This child had broken through. She had found her voice not just technically, but spiritually. Was that okay? Destiny asked nervously. "That was extraordinary," Margaret whispered. "That was everything I hoped you could be. Destiny, you just sang your way into greatness." The night of the concert, Margaret sat in the audience at Disney Concert Hall, surrounded by hundreds of people in their finest clothes. She wore her best dress, a simple black garment from a thrift store that she had cleaned and pressed carefully. Beside her sat James, nervous energy radiating from him in waves. "What if she freezes?" he whispered. "What if she forgets the words? What if something goes wrong?" "She won't," Margaret said with certainty. "Trust her. Trust what we've built together." When Destiny walked onto that enormous stage, she looked tiny and impossibly young. The spotlight found her, and for a moment she stood frozen, eyes wide, searching the darkness for familiar faces. Then she found Margaret and James, and her expression steadied. The opening notes began. Destiny took a breath, just as Margaret had taught her, and then she sang. Her voice filled the concert hall with a purity and power that silenced the restless audience immediately. Every note was perfect, but more than that, every note carried genuine emotion. She wasn't just performing, she was sharing her soul. When she reached the climax of the song, her voice soaring on the high notes with crystalline clarity, Margaret heard gasps around her. She looked at James and saw tears streaming down his face. She realized she was crying too. The final note hung in the air for what seemed like an eternity. Then the audience erupted. Not polite applause, but a standing ovation that went on and on. People were wiping their eyes. Strangers were hugging each other. Something transcendent had just happened. Backstage afterward, Margaret and James found Destiny surrounded by people. Chorus directors, school administrators, and several well-dressed individuals who Margaret recognized as talent scouts. One of them, a distinguished woman in her 60s, approached James. "I'm Dr. Patricia Williams from the Los Angeles Performing Arts Academy. Your daughter is extraordinary. We would like to offer her a full scholarship for our advanced program starting next fall. It covers tuition, which is $35,000 annually. She has a gift that shouldn't be wasted." James looked stunned. "A full scholarship? That's incredibly generous. We have a special fund for exceptional talent," Dr. Williams said. "Your daughter qualifies. But I must ask, who is her teacher? Because whoever trained her did remarkable work." James smiled and gestured toward Margaret. "This is Miss Margaret Sullivan, best teacher in Los Angeles." Dr. Williams studied Margaret with new interest. "Sullivan, wait, Lady Maggie Sullivan, from San Francisco. I saw you perform in 1978 at the Jazz Workshop. You were magnificent. I was just a graduate student then, but I've never forgotten your voice." Margaret blushed, unused to being recognized. "That was a long time ago. Clearly you've lost none of your skill, just redirected it," Dr. Williams said. "We're always looking for exceptional instructors at the Academy. Would you consider joining our faculty? We could offer you a teaching position, $25 per hour for private lessons, with a guaranteed 20 hours per week, plus benefits and use of our facilities." Margaret stood speechless. 7 months ago she had $7 and no hope. Now she was being offered a teaching position that would pay $500 per week, and her student was being given a scholarship that would change her life. Miss Margaret has to say yes, Destiny piped up, pushing through the crowd. She has to teach at the academy, because I'm going there, and I need her. We're a team. Dr. Williams smiled. Well, there you have it. What do you say, Miss Sullivan? Margaret looked at James, at Destiny, at this life that had materialized from nothing. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. Yes, I'll do it. The first year at the Los Angeles Performing Arts Academy was transformative for both Margaret and Destiny. Margaret found herself teaching 12 students, all remarkably talented, and she approached each one with the same intensity she had brought to Destiny. The academy provided her with a real studio, proper equipment, and a stable income that allowed her to live comfortably for the first time in decades. Destiny thrived in the competitive environment, her natural talent sharpened by daily classes in music theory, performance and technique. She made friends with other gifted students, and found herself in a world where being passionate about music was normal rather than weird. But success brought new challenges. The Academy's director of vocal performance, a man named Richard Thornton, had his own star student, a 17-year-old named Madison Hayes. Madison had been the school's golden child for 3 years, winning every competition, landing every solo, attracting attention from recording executives. Then Destiny arrived, and suddenly Madison had competition. At 12 years old, Destiny matched and sometimes exceeded Madison's technical skills, and her emotional depth was undeniable. The school's annual showcase was approaching, where industry professionals would attend looking for the next big discovery. Traditionally, the showcase featured multiple solo performances, but the closing number was always given to a senior student. Richard Thornton assumed Madison would close the show, but Dr. Williams, after hearing both girls in rehearsal, told him that Destiny should be given one of the featured solo spots, equal billing with Madison. The decision created a rift. Thornton argued that giving a 12-year-old equal standing with a 17-year-old senior undermined the school's hierarchy and sent the wrong message about paying dues. He implied that Destiny was being given preferential treatment because of Margaret's connection to Dr. Williams. The conflict came to a head in a particularly tense faculty meeting, where Thornton directly challenged Margaret. "With all due respect, Miss Sullivan," he said, his tone making clear he had none, "you've been teaching professionally for less than a year. I've been training vocalists for 25 years. Perhaps you're overestimating what a 12-year-old is capable of handling." The room went silent. Everyone knew Thornton's reputation for arrogance, but this was unusually direct. Margaret felt old anger rising. The dismissal, the condescension, it reminded her of all the times she had been underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. But she kept her voice level. "Mr. Thornton, I may be new to formal teaching, but I spent 20 years performing professionally at the highest level. I sang with Duke Ellington. I headlined at venues your students dream about. I know what it takes to own a stage, and I'm telling you that Destiny has it. What she has is an enthusiastic new teacher who hasn't learned the importance of pacing development," Thornton replied. "Pushing a child this hard, this fast, is how we create burnout. Madison has earned her place through years of dedication." "Nobody is saying Madison hasn't earned recognition," Dr. Williams interrupted firmly. "She'll close the showcase as planned. Destiny will have a featured solo in the first half. Both girls deserve to shine. If you can't support that, Richard, we have a problem." After the meeting, Margaret found herself doubting for the first time. Was Thornton right? Was she pushing Destiny too hard because of her own need to prove herself? That night, she barely slept, replaying the confrontation, questioning every decision she had made. When James heard about the conflict from Destiny, he came to the academy to speak with Margaret. "Is this too much pressure on her?" he asked, his concern evident. "She's only 12. Maybe Thornton has a point about her not being ready." Margaret understood his worry. She had been asking herself the same questions, but she also knew what she heard when Destiny sang. "James, I wouldn't put her in this position if I didn't believe she could handle it. But I need to be honest with you, I'm scared too. What if I'm wrong? What if my judgment is clouded by my own need to prove that I still matter? James was quiet for a long moment. Do you believe in her talent? Yes, absolutely. Do you believe she's ready? Margaret thought carefully before answering. Yes, I do. Then we trust you, James said. But more than that, we trust Destiny. She hasn't complained once about the work. She practices every day without being asked. She loves this. So unless she tells us it's too much, we let her fly. Margaret nodded, grateful for his faith but still carrying the weight of responsibility. What if she was wrong? The night of the showcase arrived with all the weight of Judgment Day. The Academy's theater was packed with industry professionals, talent scouts, recording executives and parents. Television cameras were positioned throughout the venue. This wasn't just a school performance, it was a launching pad for careers. Backstage, Margaret found Destiny in her dressing room, staring at her reflection with wide, frightened eyes. The girl who usually bounced with confidence, looked small and uncertain. I can't do this, Destiny whispered. There are so many people. What if I mess up? What if my voice cracks? What if I forget the words? Margaret knelt beside her, taking Destiny's trembling hands. Baby girl, listen to me. You have prepared for this. You know this song inside and out. You've sung it perfectly 100 times. But what if tonight is the time I don't? What if I let you down? Let Daddy down? What if Mr. Thornton is right and I'm not ready? You could never let us down, Margaret said firmly. Success isn't about being perfect, it's about being brave enough to try. Your mama would be so proud of you right now, not because of how you performed tonight, but because you're standing here ready to take this chance. I wish she was here, Destiny said, tears starting to fall. She is here, Margaret said, touching Destiny's chest over her heart. She's right here, and so am I, and your daddy. You're never alone on that stage, Destiny. We're all singing with you. There was a knock on the door. 5 minutes, Miss Carter. Destiny stood, wiping her eyes. Margaret helped her adjust her dress, a simple but elegant blue gown that James and the church ladies had pooled money to buy. Remember what I taught you about breathing, Margaret said. Remember to feel the words, not just sing them. And remember that no matter what happens out there, you have already made us proud. You are already successful. Everything else is just extra. Destiny hugged Margaret tightly. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for giving me a reason to believe in anything again, Margaret whispered back. Margaret found her seat in the audience next to James. He was wearing his Sunday suit, and his hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles were pale. She's going to be fine, Margaret said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. Angela should be here, James said, his voice thick with emotion. She should see this. She does see it, Margaret said, taking his hand in a gesture of support. I promise you she sees it. The showcase began. Student after student performed, each one talented and polished. Halfway through, it was Destiny's turn. Dr. Williams took the stage for the introduction. Our next performer is one of our youngest students, but don't let her age fool you. This young woman has a gift that transcends technical training. She sings from a place of deep emotional truth. Please welcome Destiny Carter. Destiny walked onto the stage, and for a moment she looked terrified. The spotlight found her. The theater was completely silent. Margaret could feel James holding his breath beside her. Then Destiny found them in the audience. She looked directly at Margaret and James, and something in her expression steadied. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, as if to say, I remember, I'm ready. The opening notes of Summertime began. It was a risky choice, a jazz standard that had been performed by countless legends, a song that could reveal every flaw in technique and emotion. Destiny opened her mouth and sang. Her voice filled the theater with a richness that belied her age. She didn't just sing the lyrics, she lived them. Every note carried weight and meaning. She took the familiar melody and made it her own, adding subtle variations that showed both respect for the tradition and confidence in her own artistry. The audience was transfixed. You could have heard a pin drop. Margaret watched hardened industry executives lean forward in their seats, watched skeptical faces transform into expressions of wonder. She watched Thornton in the wings, his expression shifting from skepticism to genuine shock. When Destiny reached the final verse, her voice soared on "Don't You Cry" with such pure emotion that Margaret felt tears streaming down her face. Beside her, James was openly weeping. The final note hung in the air like a blessing, then silence. A beat, 2 beats, then the theater erupted. The entire audience rose as one, applauding, cheering, some people actually shouting in their enthusiasm. The standing ovation went on for 3 full minutes. Destiny stood on that stage, tears running down her face, bowing again and again. The showcase continued. Madison Hayes closed the show with a technically flawless performance that earned enthusiastic applause, but everyone in that theater knew they had witnessed something special earlier in the evening. Backstage afterward, they were mobbed. Recording executives pressed business cards into James's hands. Talent scouts made offers. Dr. Williams beamed with pride. Even Thornton approached, his expression grudging but honest. "I was wrong," he said to Margaret. "That was extraordinary. You were right about her." But Margaret barely heard him. She was watching Destiny and James embrace, watching a father hold his daughter while both of them cried tears of joy and relief and vindication. She had done it. She had taken a gifted child and helped her become something exceptional. Later, after most of the crowd had dispersed, the 3 of them sat together in Destiny's dressing room. James had his arm around his daughter. Margaret sat across from them, feeling like she was part of something precious. "I love you both," Destiny said simply. "You're my family." And Margaret realized it was true. Somewhere along the way, this mechanic and his daughter had become her family. The first real family she'd had since losing Marcus. Not romantic love, but something equally profound. The love of chosen family, of people who saw each other and decided to care. 4 years passed in a blur of success and growth. Destiny graduated from the academy at 17, already fielding offers from recording labels. But she chose to attend Berklee College of Music in Boston, wanting to study composition and production alongside performance. Margaret had encouraged this, believing that true artists needed depth and breadth of knowledge. Margaret continued teaching at the academy, becoming one of their most sought-after instructors. Her studio was always full, and several of her students had gone on to professional careers. She had found not just purpose but fulfillment in shaping young talent. James's auto shop had expanded, now employing 3 mechanics and serving a loyal customer base. He had bought a small house in a better neighborhood. Margaret had eventually moved into a modest apartment near the academy, though she kept the space above Carter's Auto Repair as her studio. That space had been where her resurrection began. It felt sacred. Then came the invitation that would change everything again. The San Francisco Jazz Festival was celebrating its 70th anniversary with a special tribute to legendary performers who had graced its stages. Margaret received a formal letter requesting her presence as one of the honored artists. They wanted to screen archival footage of her performances and have current artists pay tribute to her legacy. Margaret's first instinct was to refuse. Returning to San Francisco meant confronting a past she had tried to leave behind. It meant facing the ghost of who she used to be. It meant acknowledging dreams that had died. But Destiny, home from college for summer break, insisted she accept. "Miss Margaret, you need to do this," Destiny said firmly. They were sitting in Margaret's studio where they still had lessons whenever Destiny was home. "You spent years helping me become who I'm meant to be. Now you need to honor who you were. That woman deserves to be celebrated." "I'm not that woman anymore," Margaret protested. "That was a different life." "No, you're better," Destiny said. "That woman was a great performer. You're a great performer and a great teacher. You're more complete now. And besides, I have a surprise for the festival, but I need you there." So Margaret agreed. James insisted on driving her to San Francisco, making it a road trip. Destiny would meet them there, flying in from Boston with some mysterious preparation she refused to explain. The drive up the California coast was beautiful and bittersweet. Margaret pointed out landmarks from her performing days, clubs that were now gone, restaurants where musicians had gathered after late-night gigs. James listened with the patience of a good friend, understanding that she needed to talk through the memories to make peace with them. "Do you miss it?" he asked as they passed through Monterey. "Performing, I mean, the applause, the stage, all of it." Margaret considered the question carefully. sometimes, but not as much as I would have expected. Teaching Destiny, watching her grow, helping shape other young voices, that's given me something performing never quite did. Legacy. When I performed, I was creating moments. As a teacher, I'm creating artists who will create their own moments. That feels more important somehow. The festival was being held at the Davies Symphony Hall, the same venue where Margaret had performed some of her most celebrated concerts. Walking into the building after 24 years felt surreal. The architecture was the same, but everything else had changed. She had changed most of all. The tribute was scheduled for the festival's closing night. Before that, Margaret attended other performances, soaking in the music, reconnecting with the art form she had loved so desperately. She ran into old colleagues, some who remembered her warmly, others who barely recognized her. The jazz world had moved on without her, as worlds always do. The night of the tribute, Margaret sat in the audience beside James, nervous despite herself. The program included performances by current jazz stars, each singing one of her signature songs. It was beautiful and painful to hear her repertoire reinterpreted by younger voices with perfect technique. Then came the archival footage. Margaret on stage in her prime, her voice soaring, her presence magnetic. She had forgotten how good she was, how completely she had commanded the stage. Watching herself sing God Bless the Child to a rapt audience made her cry. "You were magnificent," James whispered, squeezing her hand in friendly support. After the footage ended, the festival director, a man named Lawrence Chen, took the microphone. Margaret Sullivan graced our stages for nearly 2 decades before a tragic accident ended her performing career. But tonight we have a special surprise. One of her students has asked to honor her teacher by performing the song that Margaret made famous in San Francisco. Please welcome from Berklee College of Music, Destiny Carter. Margaret gasped as Destiny walked onto the stage, looking poised and professional in a simple black dress. She hadn't known Destiny was performing. This was the surprise. Destiny adjusted the microphone and spoke. "Miss Margaret Sullivan saved my life. I don't mean that as a metaphor. When my father and I met her, we were lost in grief. She gave us purpose. She took a girl with talent and taught her how to be an artist. Everything I am, everything I will become, I owe to her." This song is called Here's to Life, and Margaret used to close every show with it. Tonight, I sing it for her. The music began, and Destiny sang. Margaret had performed this song hundreds of times. She knew every note, every emotional beat. But hearing Destiny sing it, hearing her student take this deeply personal song and make it her own while still honoring the original interpretation, was overwhelming. Destiny's voice had matured, gained depth and power while retaining its emotional authenticity. She sang about surviving loss, about choosing to embrace life despite its cruelty, about finding joy in the broken pieces, and she sang it directly to Margaret, making it a love letter from student to teacher. When she finished, the standing ovation was instant and thunderous. But Destiny wasn't done. She gestured to Margaret. "Miss Margaret, would you join me up here?" Margaret froze. She couldn't perform. Her voice was ruined. This was asking too much. But James gently pushed her toward the aisle. The audience was clapping, encouraging her. And Destiny was holding out her hand like a lifeline. Margaret climbed onto the stage, her heart pounding. Destiny hugged her tight. "I'm not asking you to sing," Destiny whispered. "Just stand with me. Let these people honor you. You deserve it." Destiny spoke to the audience. "My teacher once told me that teaching is about creating a legacy. Tonight I want to announce that Margaret Sullivan and I are establishing a scholarship fund at the Los Angeles Performing Arts Academy. It will provide full tuition for talented students who can't afford training. We're calling it the Second Chances Fund because everyone deserves a second chance to pursue their dreams." The audience roared approval. Margaret was crying openly now, overwhelmed by the honor, by the symmetry of it all. She had received a second chance. Now she and Destiny would provide them for others. But Destiny had one more surprise. She spoke quietly, just to Margaret. "I know your voice isn't what it was, but it's not gone. I've heard you hum while you teach. I've heard you demonstrate phrases. Your voice has changed, but it still has beauty. Will you sing one verse with me? Just one. For all the people who loved Lady Maggie and need to hear her one more time." Margaret wanted to refuse. Her pride, her fear, her shame about her damaged voice all screamed at her to say no. But she looked at Destiny's hopeful face, at James beaming from the audience, at thousands of people waiting to hear even a shadow of what she used to be. One verse, she whispered. The music began again. This time an arrangement of What a Wonderful World, slow and tender. Destiny sang the first verse alone, her voice pure and strong. Then she nodded to Margaret. Margaret opened her mouth. Her voice came out rough, damaged, a shadow of its former glory. But as she sang about trees of green and skies of blue, something remarkable happened. Destiny's voice wove around hers, supporting and harmonizing, making Margaret's imperfect voice part of something beautiful. Together they created a sound that was about more than technical perfection. It was about love and legacy and the unbreakable bond between teacher and student. The audience listened with complete attention. When the final note faded, the silence lasted several heartbeats, then applause that felt like absolution, like acceptance, like welcome home. Later that night, back at their hotel, the three of them sat together in Margaret's room. Destiny had kicked off her heels and was curled up in a chair. James had loosened his tie. Margaret was still in her tribute dress, too tired to change. "Thank you," Margaret said to Destiny, "for tonight, for everything, for insisting I be honored, for singing with me despite my broken voice." "Your voice isn't broken," Destiny said firmly. "It's different. It tells a different story now. Not about perfection, but about survival. About keeping going when everything says quit. That's a more important story." "You know what I realized tonight," James said. "That day at Rosie's diner, I thought I was helping you, Margaret. But really you were helping us." Destiny needed a teacher who understood loss and could teach her to transform pain into art. "I needed to remember that kindness creates connection. We needed each other." Margaret looked at these two people who had become her family. A mechanic with grease permanently under his nails and a heart bigger than the Pacific Ocean. A gifted young woman who had taken Margaret's broken dreams and built something new from the pieces. "I had $7 that day," Margaret said softly. "Not enough for a proper meal. Certainly not enough to change my life, but sometimes what we have is exactly what we need. Not to buy what we want, but to put us in the right place at the right time to meet the right people." $7 and divine intervention, Destiny said with a smile. "Or maybe just $7 and the willingness to accept help when it's offered," James added. "And the courage to offer help when you see someone needs it." They sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the journey that had brought them here. From that first meeting in a diner to this moment in San Francisco, celebrating not just Margaret's past but their shared future. "What happens next?" Destiny asked eventually. "I graduate in 3 years. You'll keep teaching. Daddy's shop is doing great. What's our next chapter?" Margaret smiled. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. That's what families do, and that's what we are now. A family built not by blood but by choice, by kindness, by the decision to see each other and refuse to look away." James raised his water glass. "To second chances, to $7 that bought us everything. To the family we chose." They clinked glasses, and Margaret felt a completeness she hadn't experienced since before the accident. She had spent 24 years believing her life was over when her voice failed, but she had been wrong. Her life hadn't ended. It had transformed. She thought about all the students she had taught, all the young voices she had helped shape. She thought about the scholarship fund that would give others the chance she had been given. She thought about this man and his daughter who had seen her not as a charity case but as someone with value to offer. The next morning they drove back to Los Angeles, the three of them talking and laughing, making plans for the future. Destiny would finish college and probably sign a recording contract. Margaret would continue teaching, continue building her legacy one student at a time. James would keep his shop, keep helping his community, keep being the kind of man who saw need and met it without hesitation. And every year on the anniversary of that first meeting they would return to Rosie's diner. They would order the meatloaf special, chocolate chip pancakes and turkey clubs. They would have chocolate milkshakes, and they would look around for someone who needed kindness, who needed to be seen, who needed a second chance. Because Margaret had learned that $7 wasn't much. But combined with compassion and the courage to connect with strangers, it was enough to change 3 lives forever. Destiny went on to become one of the most successful recording artists of her generation, but she never forgot where she came from. Every album included a note thanking Miss Margaret Sullivan, the teacher who taught her that technique without soul was just noise. Margaret taught at the academy for 13 more years, retiring at 90 only because her health finally demanded it. By then she had trained over 200 students, 15 of whom went on to professional careers. The Second Chances Fund had helped 58 young people attend the academy who otherwise couldn't have afforded it. James ran his shop until he was 65, then passed it on to his lead mechanic, a young man James had mentored just as he had been mentored. He never lost his commitment to helping others, teaching everyone around him that fixing cars was important, but fixing lives mattered more. On Margaret's final day of teaching, her studio was packed with former students who had come from around the country to honor her. Destiny, now 22 and at the peak of her career, performed What a Wonderful World one more time, her voice as pure and powerful as ever. When she finished, she helped Margaret to the microphone. The elderly woman's voice was barely a whisper now, but everyone listened as if she were still commanding the stage at the Black Hawk. "I started with $7, Margaret said, and I gained a fortune beyond measure. Not in money, though that came too, but in love. In purpose, in the knowledge that even when we think we have nothing left to give, life can surprise us with new ways to matter." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, many of them her students, all of them touched by her teaching. To anyone struggling right now, anyone who thinks their best days are behind them, anyone who feels invisible and forgotten, I want you to know something. You are one moment away from everything changing, one connection away from finding your purpose again. One act of kindness away from discovering that you still have so much to offer the world. Never underestimate the power of $7 and an open heart. Never underestimate the miracle of being seen. Never underestimate what can happen when we choose connection over isolation, hope over despair, love over fear. The room erupted in applause, and Margaret sat down, exhausted but satisfied. She had said what needed saying. She had come full circle from that elderly woman counting change at a diner counter to this moment of recognition and celebration. Margaret Sullivan died peacefully 2 years later, at the age of 92, surrounded by James and Destiny, and dozens of former students who had come to say goodbye. Her funeral was held at the Los Angeles Performing Arts Academy, and her students performed a concert in her honor. Destiny sang Here's to Life one final time, her voice breaking with emotion but never wavering in its power. When she finished, she spoke to the packed auditorium. Miss Margaret used to say that $7 changed her life, but it wasn't the money, it was the willingness to accept love when it was offered. It was the courage to trust strangers, it was the decision to keep going even when everything seemed hopeless. She taught me that talent is just potential, it's what you do with it that matters. It's whether you use your gift to lift others up, it's whether you remember where you came from, and help others on the same journey. So I'm asking all of you today to honor Miss Margaret by doing what she did. See the people others overlook, offer kindness to strangers. Use whatever gifts you have to make the world a little better. Be willing to take risks on people who others have given up on. And remember that you are never too old, never too broken, never too far gone to start over. Miss Margaret was 74 years old with $7 to her name when my father saw her in that diner. Look what she built from that moment. Look at all of us here today, proof of her impact. The audience stood in sustained applause, many wiping away tears. And in that moment they all understood that Margaret Sullivan's greatest performance hadn't been on any stage. It had been the life she lived after she thought her performing days were over. The Second Chances Fund continued to grow, eventually expanding beyond the academy to help young artists across California. James became its board member after Margaret died, managing it alongside community volunteers, until he passed away at 79. Destiny recorded an album called $7 dedicated to Margaret's memory. It became her best-selling record, with all proceeds going to the scholarship fund. The title track told the story of that day at Rosie's Diner, of three people whose lives intersected in the most unexpected way. And every year on the anniversary of that first meeting, Destiny returned to Los Angeles. She went to Rosie's Diner sometimes alone, sometimes with her own children. She ordered the meatloaf special, chocolate chip pancakes and turkey clubs. She had chocolate milkshakes, and she always paid for one extra meal, leaving it for whoever came in next and couldn't quite afford what they needed. Because Margaret had taught them that kindness isn't about grand gestures or huge amounts of money, it's about seeing people. It's about offering help when help is needed. It's about understanding that we all struggle, we all need grace, we all deserve a second chance. $7 had been enough, not because of its monetary value, but because it had put Margaret in the right place at the right time to meet the right people. And those people had chosen to see her not as she was in that moment of desperation, but as she could become with support and opportunity. That was the real lesson. That was Margaret Sullivan's true legacy, not the recordings from her performing days, though those were treasured. Not even the hundreds of students she taught, though they were remarkable. But the understanding that transformation is always possible. That redemption waits around every corner. That $7 and an open heart can change the world. Years after Margaret's passing, a young woman entered Rosie's Diner counting change in her palm. She ordered water and toast, the only thing she could afford. At the counter sat a successful businesswoman and her teenage son celebrating his acceptance to college. The woman noticed the young girl's struggle and remembered a story her mother Destiny used to tell her. A story about $7 and a chance meeting that changed everything. The woman turned to the girl and smiled. "Excuse me, would you like to join us? We're celebrating, and celebrations are always better when you share them." And the circle continued, because that's what love does. It multiplies, it spreads, it transforms the world one $7 moment at a time. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.